And still on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, United States President Joe Biden has announced that the U.S. will ban Russian aircraft from its airspace. He made the announcement on Tuesday as part of his first State of the Union address before both houses of Congress. The U.S. is joining Canada and the European Union in closing off its airspace to Russian aircraft following President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And following the announcement, the Federal Aviation Administration said the official notice banning Russian aircraft from the U.S. airspace would be posted immediately. This includes scheduled passenger flights as well as cargo and charter flights. The move is the latest retaliatory measure leveled against Mr. Putin for launching an unprovoked full-scale invasion into Ukraine.
We're choking Russia's access. We're choking Russia's access to technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who built billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States, I mean it.
And global affairs analyst Sam Fateh joins me now from Washington, D.C. for more on this. Sam, good to have you join us as always. I want to start from this speech by President Biden. How tough do you think he was? And just that show of commitment to his United States Ukrainian allies?
Well, first off, we have never seen a more bipartisan applause during the State of the Union, like we did yesterday in the U.S. Congress. Now, of course, he sounded tough, and he showed that the U.S. is willing to lead NATO. He shows that the U.S. is committed to giving aid to Ukraine and for them to fight the Russians, and that way they can push them back. However, the question that we must all stick to ask is that enough for Ukraine to hold off Russia? I think that is what is bothering a lot of people. This is a war or an invasion that Ukraine cannot fight on its own. So everybody cannot just stand by and think that they will be able to fight Russia and win. I mean, despite the economic sanctions and some of the restrictions and some of the economic turmoil that has been placed on Russian government, of course, it's not the Soviet Union. Russia today is not as strong as the Soviet Union. It is not even as rich as the Soviet Union. But they are determined to push forward. They are determined to fight militarily. They have the capacity and they have the capability to really devastate Ukraine.
Ukraine is not a part of NATO, so there is nothing. NATO cannot put boots on the ground in Ukraine. But there are those who are now saying that the supply of military weapons and the sanctions perhaps might not be enough. When you listen to claims by Russia that it has taken some parts of some cities, it's also claiming Kherson, that it has taken Kherson, even though the mayor has said the city is still under Ukrainian the control of Ukrainian forces. As Russia continues to gain control of some cities in Ukraine, do you think that perhaps the United States and Europe should rethink its strategy and put boots on the ground?
I mean, they have to rethink their strategy. The only reason why the United States and Europe are not putting boots on the ground is not because Ukraine is not part of NATO. In my point of view, the only reason why they are not putting boots on the ground is they are trying to prevent a third world war. Clearly, they rather have a proxy war than have a third world war. But at some point, that in itself, the morality of that is going to be questioned, because we know very well that Russia is looking for a pro-Russian government. Europe and the West is looking for a pro-Western government, which they have in the current president. So again, Russia wants to build a buffer between them and NATO and the rest of Europe. And Europe is trying to make sure that they have somebody that supports their ideology and their ideas and they can work with in Ukraine. That is what this issue is about. This is about history, you know. And so when you factor all of that in, why are they not putting boots on the ground? Is to prevent another world war. I mean, we're talking about nuclear powers here. So of course we have to be very careful with what we think they should do. and they have to be very strategic and very careful. And this is why they start with diplomatic sanctions. But always we ask ourselves, does these sanctions really work? I mean, we have seen sanctions implemented for a very long time on Cuba, on Iran, and also on North Korea. That didn't deter them from doing what they want to do in terms of developing nuclear weapons or changing their approach towards U.S. foreign policy or Western foreign policy. So it's going to be the same thing. We should now ask ourselves, are these sanctions enough to stop Russia? I don't think so.
But doesn't Russia already think that this is World War III or the Third World War? Because just a few hours ago, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, made a statement or granted an interview where he said that the Third World War is going to be nuclear and destructive. As it stands, Russia has put its deterrent forces on combat alert, which means that at any point in time, Russia can make the decision to use its nuclear weapons. So isn't this already the Third World War when it comes to how Russia views the war on the invasion of Ukraine?
I would say the conflict itself is at its proxy stage. You know, I'm not going to analyze it from what we call the lone cover conflict, because it's already it's past a crisis state. It was a crisis when they were at the borders, when they were in Belarus. But the invasion has happened. It's a conflict, yes. I mean, it's a Third World War in a proxy state. You know, is Russia going to use its nuclear weapons? I don't think so, because that's a bluff that would engulf them too. You know, when another person has a nuclear weapon, you have a nuclear weapon, you are a deterrent to each other. So you don't want to use that, because you blow up somewhere, somebody else is going to blow you up. You can't blow up everything at the same time. So, I mean, yes, every country is going to have themselves on alert, whether they announce it or not. But Russia announcing theirs, I think that is a big bluff. If there's going to be a world war, we're going to see naval forces fighting, air combats, and we're going to see land forces and the infantry battalions having a go at it. But will they release nuclear weapons? I do not believe that. That would be the end of the world, as we all know. And that Russia is not an exception to the world. They are part of the world. And this is why other nuclear powers like China are sitting on the fence and carefully threading the issue. They have done that before. We have seen them doing that again. But what worries is, when we say this is going to be a Third World War, it may be the U.S. and others are involved right now in Europe, and China may invade Taiwan, and then there we go. A lot of insurgents coming into northern part of Africa, and then we have those kind of crises going towards Mali. The French forces are no longer there. I mean, you have Russian forces that are helping the Malian government. So there is a huge complex global context to what is happening in Ukraine. It's not just contained there. It has effects across the world, whether it's in terms of economics, food prices, gas prices, and all of that. So again, Russia is not an exception to that feeling. They are not an exception when it comes to the world. If they nuke, that's the end of everybody.
And let's talk about, just to speak briefly on China. I think it's China's foreign minister that said, just to take that comment, it plans to play a constructive role in the escalation of tension. What that means, we would find out in coming days. But I want to ask you about Russia's claim of control over some territories and cities in Ukraine. If that continues, if Russia continues to advance, or Russia's military continues to advance in Ukraine, what does that mean for this war, for Ukraine, democracy in Ukraine? And then what more can be done by Ukraine's allies to facilitate strong resistance by Ukraine army?
They will need all the military, artillery, strategy, intelligence, and support in order to repel the Russian attacks. And in fact, Russia have made a significant gain in Ukraine. We have to admit this. Of course, there's a lot of propaganda information going out there, but as journalists, we learn to filter what's real and what's not. Now, we can see lines. I mean, we're talking about over 40 miles of Russian tanks and medical supplies, food supplies, and stuff, you know, and fighters pretty much trying to line up to go into Kiev. I think the focus that Ukraine is having is that we must make sure that we defend our political capital. That's where our freedom is. So they have to defend and protect Kiev. I mean, it's more like, it looks more like a medieval fight back in the day. You can conquer as many lands as you want. If you do not take a hold of the capital, like Mehmed II had to take over Constantinople in order to declare victory, then you are not victorious. So what they have to deny them is the ability to take Kiev. And this is why the Ukrainian forces are defending Kiev by all means necessary. But they will need the intelligence, they will need the military support, they will need the artillery, they will need the equipment, especially air defense. I mean, surprisingly, Russia has not really used its air defense. Perhaps they are trying to avoid more backlash from the global community, but they have to defend the capital, and that is their strategy. It doesn't matter what other cities they take, but they cannot take Kiev. If they do, it's pretty much going to be an overthrow, and then Russia will have the ability to install somebody that they can control. This is why Vladimir Putin defended the president of Belarus and made sure that despite popular protests against him, he did send Russian troops to ensure that that government stays in power. And now he's using Belarus in order to invade Ukraine. So it's the same thing. He tried this in 2008 in Georgia. I mean, 2014, Crimea was annexed. So it's been a long-time plan. It's been a long time coming for this entire process to play out. Did the world see that? Yes. Did they take action? They didn't take the appropriate action. And when Putin knows this, he knew that he could take such an action. Now, of course, if they are completely taken off the SWIFT code, it will impact their economy. It will impact their businesses. I mean, Russia, we know there is poverty. Putin would face some level of opposition, an increase in the level of opposition that he's already facing. The question remains, is it enough to get rid of him internally?
And whether it is enough, it remains to be seen. But just in a minute, because you mentioned Belarus, I know that Belarus already, I mean, Belarus has a lot of sanctions coming from the West as well. But do you think that because of the role it is playing and continues to play in this war, although the president has said that, look, its troops are not part of this war, but do you think that perhaps there should be more sanctions on Belarus as well?
There should be sanctions on Belarus. It should be a deterrent. It should be a lesson to other countries that if you are going to support and allow your nation, your resources to be used for such invasions, you are going to face equal measures of consequences for those decisions that your government make. So if Belarus is allowed to get away with this, other countries would follow suit as well. You know, they've chosen a side. And mind you, this is a president that Putin helped to keep in power against the popular uprising, against the will of his own people. So again, they have to face those consequences. I don't see why not that the Belarusian president, some senior members of his administration, including some of their richest people, do not have to face sanctions. So that has to be there.
All right, thank you so much for talking to us, Global Affairs Analyst Sam Fati.
My pleasure.